Hey, what's up, guys? This is Romans from Agile Toolkit, and today I'll show you some pretty unique feature of Agile UI, which is called Action. And it's a feature that is very specific to Agile UI. It's not, I haven't seen anything similar in any other framework. So for most of you, that's going to be a new learning experience. In order to demonstrate, I'll need to create a couple of components on my page. And if you remember from my previous videos, I do it by simply adding them to the layout. And this time I want to have a button that says do something. And I'll also add the label. I'll just click on label. And I want to put both inside the variables. So button. Okay, that's it. So if you are new to web applications, and you need to know a couple of things about how the whole application thing is working. So when I'm clicking the refresh button, this blue line indicates that the browser is sending a request to my PHP application that executes on the server all the lines until line number 9 over here, and it generates a response in a special format which is called HTML, which is sent back to the browser, and once browser receives this HTML, it will display it on the page. In other words, as soon as the blue line disappears, the PHP application is no longer running. So if we want to our screen over here, or this button to do something after the blue line disappeared, we need to somehow instruct the browser what does it have to do if certain event occurs. And in Agile Toolkit there is a special mechanism, action and events, which works in, for example, like that button on click and label GS class red. So let's see what that's going to do. When I click the button, the label turned red. So let's look at this method. So that's a method of the button, and I pass two parameters to that. The first one is indicating the event, which is either a click or a hover, or maybe it's a key press or something else. These are all standard JavaScript events. And the second one is what we call an action. In Agile Toolkit, action can be created in several different ways. There are several forms available, and all of that is done for your convenience. So by calling label GS, that creates a new event or action of the label, and the action will be adding a class red, but it's not adding the class right now. So if I actually remove the GS like this, actually not sure if it will work, you'll see the label is red right away, and now clicking that does nothing because it doesn't make sense. It expects second argument to be an action, and it's not. It's just, I don't know what it is. So you have to do the GS over here. It's important to understand which object it is associated with, because if I change this from label to button, then the class will be added to the button itself and not the label. And that is the first example of how we create actions. And this is an action on component. Okay, the second example I'm going to show you. So I'm going to comment that one. We'll get back to it back later. And this is essentially the way how we can extend. So there's only X amount of things that you can do through this GS thing, but sometimes you'd like to do more, and this is where the special classes, like a set of class, which we call expressions, is coming in. Right. So expression could be something like alert let's just do that. And I also have to specify namespace UI like this. So now if I click the button, the alert comes up saying 1, 2, 3. So in this case, instead of passing like execution or return of a specific method, I'm creating a new object of this class and I'm passing some parameters to it. So to properly use an expression, the argument should be passed in as a second, like as a parameter like that. This is a slightly better way because this way we avoid any JavaScript injections. So the value here can be pretty much anything. It will be automatically encoded and secured. All right, and that's so this creates like a whole new range of different expressions that can be extended. You can create your own classes that maybe rely on existing expression and so on and so on. Okay, let's look at another example, and this time I'm gonna use reload. So reload, again, it's a special class, JavaScript expressionable class, but this time instead of passing some strings and values, I can pass an object, a label. And the way how that would work is if I click on the button, oops, I'll need to comment that one. So if I click on the button, it reloads the value of the label, but since it's always label, we need to make it random. Value, let's make it random. And now when I click on do something, you see that this button is being reloaded all the time. Okay, and this is a slightly more complicated action because it involves a callback. A callback is something that triggers an additional request to the server. So if you look at like what's happening between my browser and my server, so every time I click something, it sends a request to the server, it executes this thing over here, takes only the markup for the label and sends back, places it in here on the page. So it's a bit like a complicated mechanism, but it looks pretty intuitive. Yeah, so just reloading a label and it just works. Now that's great when things just work. So that's another action object we're using here. Okay, for my next demo, I will be using a line, which is a form field line. Okay, so that should give me an entry line where I can enter some data. And let's see if I can get this data. So normally that's a part of the form, and when you submit the form, it transmits all the data for us. We don't have to worry about it. But what if I don't have a form and I just need to grab the data out of here? Okay, let's start building an action. So button on click. First, let's see if we can find the input field. It's slightly different with the fields because field is a composite component that consists of a wrapper around the field with possibly some labels and an input element as well. So I have to do line gs input, right? And from this I can do val like that. So now when I click on this button, it will place this value inside the field, and it uses the jQuery and the method of jQuery essentially to put the value inside. Now, what about getting this out? And okay, so expressions like that, the JavaScript expression can be used as an action, but they also have the value. So if I leave anything and not pass anything, this thing over here will actually return a value, and I could do something with the value. For example, if you remember this line here, how about I create an alert, but instead of showing 1 to 3, I'll put the value of the input element in here. Okay, so now if I put something and click on do something, you'll see that the value is actually being passed to here. Yeah, and I can be quite creative. I could say you entered plus like this. Okay, so that's it, passes the value, but it's actually a string, and you know, the even though this PHP code executes on the server, it still converts into JavaScript chains correctly. All right, passing. So with this, I'm essentially demonstrating that the expressions themselves can be composite. So you can put one expression into another, and obviously not only once, but several times if you want so. So there is another form that in which you can execute the callbacks. If you specify a second parameter as a function like that, you could return something back. Random is okay. Okay, now if I click the button, you'll see the button actually starts loading, and every time I'm getting a new random value, which means it actually goes to the server and asks for the random every time, generates it, sends it back, and this is why the function in here. Okay, instead of returning the value, I could probably use an expression like this as well. So I could do return expression 1 to 3, which will still work fine. See, it works fine. Or when I'm returning it, I can actually do something that targets another object, like label. The only thing I have to remember here is that this variable needs to be imported into this, which is just basic stuff, the way how scopes work in PHP. So now if I click on do something, label.js, I need to return it, that's right. So I click here, you see this turns red. Okay, but that's this action was returned from the callback. Yes, that's a very big difference. In here it wasn't, in here it was. That's why, you know, we can add some logic in here. We can do some stuff with the database. We could do something that, you know, no one knows what's happening. So here could be like a calling some internal method, function, whatever. You can do pretty much anything. But now coming back to this thing over here, so what happens if I want to take the value of the field and pass it inside, like get it inside this function? And to be honest, I can't. It's not possible with this format, because when I click on this, the function executes. It doesn't know that I will need some parameters. So there is yet another way. And if you remember, this is a very basic way how to do stuff. So it's very convenient, to be honest. There is another way, a more advanced. Okay, so in here, I'm going to create an instance of GS callback. That's yet another expression action thing. And it requires two parameters. The first parameter is a value. And in our case, I'm going to be using this. So it's kind of a list of expressions. And the second one is going to be callback. So, but the callback can now be passed some arguments. So let's say a val over here. And similarly, I could say return you have entered and that's the format for GS callback. Now, to be honest, I haven't implemented it yet, so it doesn't work yet, but this is the way how I was planning to do. So you pass one or perhaps several expressions as a first argument, and they will be passed on into a callback, which is a second argument. Now, maybe there are a few things I have to kind of consider. Maybe do it the other way around. Like have the function first, like a callback, and then have the second as a list of parameters. So it's kind of similar to the way how JS expression works. You have some code in here and some other stuff over here. Maybe that's a better way. Also, theoretically, like in most cases, we only want to pass one value inside the callback. So maybe we don't have to put it inside the array, but if we do put inside the array like this, we could pass multiple, like val2, val3, and in here as well. So it will be comma, and something will follow, something will follow. So that's another way. And then finally, coming back to this, the format of using callbacks like this, I was wondering, perhaps we could also put val in here and then put a comma and specify like GS input callback in here. So maybe we don't even need to use this extended version. Maybe we could just wrap it like that and have it work consistently with our basic callbacks. So these are some of the considerations I'm having right now. I would really want to know what you think. If you could just post your ideas in the comments, which format seems better, then I would appreciate that. So thank you. And this functionality should be in Agile Toolkit version, Agile UI version 1.2.